and I am the host for the Environment for the Americas Bird Book Club. And welcome. And again, I love seeing so many faces. Please feel free to share your lovely faces on camera. Just remember to mute so that we kind of muffle that background noise. So, and thank you for letting us know where you're joining us from. And yes, a lot of bird cold is out there. And then great birds that we're seeing. All right, so I want to give a brief overview before we get into the nitty-gritties with our author, Caren Cooper. I want to just share a little bit about Environment for the Americas. So for those of you that are joining us on a regular basis, you've heard most of this, but that for those of you that are joining us for the first time or maybe haven't heard the spiel again, I just want to share a little bit about what we do. So I'm going to share my screen and hope that technology is my friend tonight. And let's see. So again, Environment for the Americas. We protect, connect, and inspire. And so as an organization that I volunteer for, so I'm not a staff member of Environment for the Americas, I volunteer. And this is one of the fun things that I do when I volunteer. But we are committed to really connecting people and nature and bird conservation. We lead global partnerships focused on bird conservation and protecting migratory species and their habitats across international borders. And we do that with so many partners. And we really do it to nurture the next generation of conservationists. And we do it through outreach and education and creating meaningful opportunities. So we are also the home of World Migratory Bird Day, and that is our cornerstone conservation campaign central to so many of our other programs. And it really highlights the conservation of migratory birds and their habitats throughout the world. It has, because of that global reach, it really has the ability to give action to people. And again, we do that through a lot of education, engagement, and it's across borders. So this year, we are so excited. We have revealed our theme today, and it's so appropriate for the guest that we have tonight and the book that we are going to be talking about. Our theme focuses on community science and its impact specifically for bird conservation. Every bird counts. Your observations matter. So the artwork is stunning. And for those of you that are familiar with Environment for the Americas know that every year we have a different artist who creates the artwork that we use in educational materials and the poster. So I'm super excited about this, and the detail in this artwork on this poster is just phenomenal. So more about that as we visit the website and you get our newsletters and that sort of thing. I want to make sure that you are aware of our internship programs. That's one of the ways that we can really work to increase the knowledge of young people who might want careers in the conservation arena. We partner with the Forest Service, the National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, Audubon chapters, other bird clubs, and other natural resource agencies and organizations. This allows us to offer hands-on experience and mentorship, and it really does help equip the next generation of conservationists, gives them skills and connections that we need for that stewardship and continuing the conservation work that is so important for birds and their habitats and for people. So there are a lot of ways that you can support our work. You can become a member. You can donate to a Happy Kit, and this is really cool. When I went to Colombia last year, I can say that now because it's 2026. In 2025, a group of us went to Colombia, and we saw the great benefit of having those kits in Central and South America. The education that's in the school system is so important for those students, and your $100 goes really far to help with that. You can also donate toward binoculars, because that's a great thing for students to be able to have to participate in citizen science, as well as learn more about the birds and their habitats. You can also donate airline miles. So we send our interns around the world, mostly in the Western Hemisphere, but those miles really are very helpful in keeping expenses down. And that if you're going on a trip, or if you need an excuse to go on a trip, we love it when you can take some tools and equipment to communities that you might be visiting. We have a trip planned to Colombia in October. And so I liked my first trip so much, I'm going to go again. And then you can always go shopping. And of course, going shopping online. I got this beautiful scarf online from Environment for the Americas. And so you can go shopping. And because we have so many cool things going on with our Bird Book Club, we're going to be the second Thursday of each month. You can register for those just like you registered for this. You can register for multiples at the same time. But one of the things that we're doing is the February Bird Book Club is during February, of course. But what happens in February? It's Valentine's Day in February. And so not only do we have Bird, Sex, and Beauty as our Bird Book Club in February, but we are offering a February Valentine special. And this special allows you to send a message of love to teachers and coworkers and neighbors. And I've already got 4 people on my list to whom I will be ordering this Valentine special for, just to let them know that they matter and that the work that we do matters. And I want to be able to share that with them. So get your cameras out, click on that QR code so that you can remember that you can order later, and it will be a great Valentine's Day. So, or week, or whatever we decide to do. So tonight I'm super excited to introduce Caren Cooper. She's a faculty member at North Carolina State University, and she studies bird ecology, urban ecology, inclusive engagement in the participatory sciences. She's an advocate for public science, and we're going to dive deeper into what that means. And oh my gosh, it's amazing, all of the science that she has in the book that we're going to talk about tonight. So community science, being able to think about diversity in science careers. She's dedicated also to training and mentoring students, which is incredibly important for our future. Pursuing those careers is a passion of hers, or help in those careers is a passion of Caren's. So she has authored Citizen Science, How Ordinary People Are Changing the Face of Discovery, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. And then she's also co-authored the Field Guide to Citizen Science, How to Contribute to Scientific Research and Make a Difference. So I am so glad, so happy to have you on tonight, Caren. And for those of you that have joined our Bird Book Clubs before, you know that I have many, many questions, and I'm so super excited to entertain them with you all tonight. If you have a question or thoughts or comments or things that you want to discuss, please put them in the chat so that we are aware that you are asking a question or have something to say. And then we can moderate the questions as we move forward. So, Caren, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, hey. Thanks so much for having me. Hi everybody. I'm really honored to be here. It's uh it's just really exciting. And in some ways it's just like a blast from the past to be like, because my book, it's been like, well, I think it came out in December of 2016. And um and it was I'm going to share a bit about my journey in of what led up to the book. And and then I'm also happy to talk about my journey since. Um, but uh yeah, anyway, it's just a real pleasure to be here. And I love like the wine. It's like I could just lift up the glass and we can
Yeah,
all.
I'm so totally jealous.
Um, so I have a few slides to share just to walk through some of sort of the birth of the book. And then, and then we'll chat. So let's see here. I can share my screen. Um,
So, Caren, while you get your slides set up, just for those of you that are new to join us, we're pretty informal and we like to have a little bit of fun with the books that we're reading. So we're gonna have fun tonight.
yeah, and also if you have a question at any time, feel free. I mean, I don't mind. Feel free to ask at any time. Whether it's in the chat and you can let me know if it's in the chat or if you unmute. Um, all right, so uh yeah, so the book that I wrote, Citizen Science: How Ordinary People Are Changing the Face of Discovery. Um, my publisher was here in the US, but they had a sister company in the UK, and that's what this book, this version of it looked like there. And then also there was a publisher in Mexico who translated it and published it in Spanish and distributed it across Spanish-speaking countries. And then, like Alicia said, after that, we also, with Darlene Cavalier um, and Catherine, we made this little field guide to citizen science. But I'm going to talk about this first book, Citizen Science. And I chose this cover because, like, one of the highlights of my life was having Deborah Bloom write a review of my book in the Washington Post. And so this little excerpt from it made it onto the book cover. But in the Washington Post, it was like a full page. It was a huge picture, and then a half a page, the other half of the page was her reviewing the book and like glowing about it. So I was like, anyway, that was amazing. And in it, she says she's like kind of converted to citizen science. Like it got her so excited. Um, so my start goes way back. So now I'm a professor at North Carolina State University, and I've been here for like, well, almost, I don't know, around 7 or 8 years. But I actually started, I was an undergraduate here at NC State way back in the day in the 80s. And my first internship was studying bears in the mountains of North Carolina. So this is a tranquilized bear. And this was in the winter. We were doing some work during winter and pulling it from its den. But in the summers, we trapped the bears and put radio collars on them. And I was an intern, but we needed a lot of help. And so every 2 weeks, we had volunteers who came from Earthwatch. Are people, anyone familiar with Earthwatch? Have you heard of it? Some have, I see maybe some heads. So Earthwatch, it's basically people can go like take a 2 week vacation, an expedition they call it, and go be, Jane Goodall for 2 weeks, whatever. You can go be a field biologist and help on a project anywhere in the world. Anyway, this project that I helped on was so I helped supervise the Earthwatch volunteers. So here I was early in my career, like literally it was my first internship. So I'm like 18 in this picture. Um, and I was working side by side with people who were volunteering. And I saw how hard they worked and how dedicated they were and all the different skills they brought from their regular life and their regular careers that they brought to the project. Um, and so I didn't know it at the time, but it turned out it was very formative for me to be really receptive. It wasn't called citizen science back then, but to be really receptive to the idea of citizen science. Um, Anyways, but at the time I was like, oh, I want to be a field biologist. So, oh, I was gonna, before I go further, uh, it's an abrupt switch, but I'm going to go back to that train of thought. Um, but just because I was like, oh, everyone's a birder. So just to emphasize the importance of things, I wanted to ask you all this question. So of these six birds, this is like a Sesame Street question. Which one of these is not like the other? There's one of these that is very different from all the others in a particular way. And you can guess in the chat or I don't know, you can yell it out or whatever you might think. Are there guesses? This is the participant,
Um, Penguin is a guess.
and it's a,
Top
well,
right,
say again.
top right, question mark.
Okay, it's good
And then
guess. Good guess.
bluebird. Bluebird
Bluebirds
is a
aren't
guess.
extinct.
Some are guessing bluebird. Okay.
Oh, and somebody, I think I heard somebody say the one that's extinct.
Which one would that be? So if
And
I
then we
start
have
to,
the passenger pigeon, and what else is extinct?
okay, yeah. Uh, so the, so if I start to say what these are, you might definitely guess, maybe. So the one on the upper left, probably no one's ever seen. It's New Zealand bird, and called a laughing owl, although I don't think it's a true owl. Um, there's the Carolina parakeet. The one on the top right is a great auk. There's the passenger pigeon. There's the dusky seaside sparrow, and there's the eastern bluebird. Now, anybody want to guess?
So there were a couple who said bluebird is
There
not
were
like the
some.
others.
Do they want to say why?
So June or Nancy, do you feel like coming on and
It's not
telling us what
extinct.
you're thinking?
Exactly. Yes. Right. So really, the bluebirds are the only one that's not extinct. And I like to point that out because it's not extinct because of birders, and especially birders who kind of did a lot of science, right? But not necessarily professionals. It was like people who loved bluebirds, who learned they take really readily to nest boxes, who figured out the best nest box designs, how to structure those, whether they're in, with the heat in Texas or the cold in Wisconsin, whatever, all the things they needed to do, the best habitats, the best food supplements, like pretty much everything, right? People made bluebirds not be extinct, right? And thrive. Whereas other birds, not that people didn't love them, but also whatever, it didn't happen for them, right? Which is just to emphasize like that citizen science in so many of its forms can make a huge difference. Um, anyway, that's our quiz portion for this evening. Y'all did great. It's definitely a tricky one. Um, all right, so I'm going to go back to my other train of thought, which is just I worked with the bears. So I'm just going to give you a little background on what led me to citizen science. Because at first I started as a field biologist and not just with bears. Pretty soon, like I worked with a lot of birds. So I worked and with a lot of different agencies. So with my state wildlife agency, working as a hack site attendant, meaning I helped release peregrine falcons into the wild. This was again back in the early 80s. I worked as an intern with Scott Paper because they were logging the bottomland hardwood forests in Alabama, but we were studying how that affected the songbirds there. Worked for the Fish and Wildlife Service in Puerto Rico with the Puerto Rican parrot and their recovery program. I worked with the Forest Service out west with Swainson's hawks and spotted owls. Worked with the Smithsonian in the east with Kentucky warblers and also with captive Bahama pintails. And then also actually with Siberian polecats, which was part of experiments to get ready for the release of black-footed ferrets back into the wild. Which actually, well, I did a little bit of environmental ed here and there. Uh, and yes, where I had to drive a school bus. And then I also worked a little bit in policy up in northern Michigan, tip of the mitt. And and then I went to grad school at University of Wyoming for my master's degree, studying dabbling ducks in the Tetons in a mitigated wetland. Um, and then I did my PhD at Virginia Tech, and I studied birds in Australia. Um, and part of learning to love citizen science was first learning to love field work and like the privilege of being able to like observe animals in the wild and learn about them. Um, and then also the challenges of it. Okay. So for my PhD, I was sent to Australia and I had this huge study. It was whatever, it was 3 years, one very large study site. These are the birds that I studied. They're called brown tree creepers. Um, I had over 50 breeding groups. They're cooperative breeding birds. which most of the birds in Australia are. I had over 100 nests, and I was studying them in a fragmented forest. So I was looking at how they dispersed, and I had 14 dispersal events. This was like huge. That was a paper in and of itself, right? I had 5 or 6 publications from this. When I look at it now, after working with citizen science data, like it's laughable to me. I'm like, that is such tiny little sample sizes. But anyway, but that was considered like huge. Um, I mean, and we did learn a lot. I don't want to belittle it. It was great work. I learned so much. But right after I graduated, there was a job at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to work with their citizen science data. And all of my peers were like, "No way. Who wants to do that? We want to do our own field work." And who wants to trust that volunteer data? Like that was the mindset back then. This was around 2000. And but I was like, oh no, I've worked with volunteers. This is where it circled back to my days with the Earthwatch volunteers. I was like, I've worked with volunteers. Like they're totally awesome. And so I went and worked at Cornell, and I focused on at the time it was called the Birdhouse Network. Now it's called NestWatch. I don't know if folks contribute to NestWatch data. Probably everybody does eBird, but NestWatch is awesome for any nest. It used to only be cavity nesters, but now you can contribute data on any nest you find. And this was so in 2000, it was like a huge data set by comparison, because at that time it was 20 years, over 20 years of data. Now it's over 40 years of data. And now it's thousands of sites and tens. I mean, really, I don't even know the amounts right now, but so much data across the continent on bluebirds. And so that fueled my research in my early career after my PhD. But I slowly, I started partnering with the nest box monitors, and um, and I started to just become fascinated with the people that do citizen science. And I started to work with the Human Dimensions unit at Cornell, right? So basically learning social sciences and studying people. And I started to become more fascinated with people. I hate to say it, but then with birds. Like, and I liked birds for a hobby, but I really liked studying people and understanding and knowing that conservation, like we couldn't really always, you can't tell the birds what to do or when to migrate or, but we can try to convey to people what we can do to manage our habitats. Anyway, so while I was there at Cornell, like around 11 years in or so, um, they paid for this professional development program for me to attend. It's called the Environmental Leadership Program. It's an amazing program. This wasn't my cohort. I don't have a picture of my cohort, but basically it's cohorts of people from all different disciplines, different sectors who work in different sectors who are interested in the environment. And we come together and figure out what we're going to do with our lives. I didn't realize at the time their informal like slogan was helping people quit their jobs. Anyway, and that's pretty much what it led to for me. So I went through that program and I was like, you know what? I know how I can make a difference. I want to be a thought leader in citizen science. And I was like, it's amazing. I want to bring it to the world. And at Cornell, everything is about birds. I mean, pretty much. They do a little bit with elephants and whales. But anyway, everything's really birds. And we all thought citizen science really just was something that birders do. But when I started to look into it, in every discipline I looked in, I saw citizen science, but it had a different form, a different field, different ways that it came about. Um, anyway, so I did leave Cornell. And I went to the Museum of Natural Sciences. So I came back home to North Carolina. At the museum, they had us working behind glass. Like the scientists were on exhibit. We worked behind glass. And so it was good to have a project that people could see things happening. Anyway, I had a citizen science project called Sparrow Swap, again, with people who monitor bluebird boxes. They often battle with house sparrows. We would send them these fake eggs. They would swap them in. Anyway, at the same time, I was writing my book, and I was an advisor for Crowd in the Cloud, which is it was a PBS kind of mini series about citizen science. And it's free to watch now. Like you can look up their website and all of their episodes are on there. I think there's like 6 or 8 episodes or something like that. Anyway, it was a really cool show and it was fun to advise and just to collaborate with that also while I was writing my book. Um, uh, and so what I thought I would do, well, so, okay, so whether you've read it or I don't know if you read it yet, maybe to motivate you to want to read it. So the way my book is structured, like I said, is that I was fascinated by what I was learning about citizen science in all these different disciplines. That like so many disciplines had particular research challenges that were only overcome through through the engagement of the public in that research through different citizen science projects. And so I wanted to write about what those discoveries were and the people and why people wanted to help with those. Um, and so I divided it into 3 parts. And then in each part, there were different disciplines that were featured. So part one was Hobbies of Discovery, which was actually the title that I had written for my book. But publishers actually choose the title. And my editor said, well, it's called Citizens, like it seemed obvious to him. He was like, it's called Citizen Science. Why don't we just call your book that? And I was like, whatever. Um, because I didn't know it was going to be such a controversial term later. But anyway, so it was not Hobbies of Discovery. Anyway, so yeah, meteorology, right? So like talking about so actually what people often say, oh, the longest running citizen science project is the Christmas bird count, but it's actually not. The longest running citizen science project is a project of weather monitoring, the cooperative weather observers. So they actually beat out birders. So the weather folks, and they volunteer. Anyway, you can read about it, but they're awesome. Ornithology was probably the hardest chapter to write because it was closest to home. Entomology, I'll mention in a little bit, like some of that was just mind blowing. Um, Astronomy also, like the people involved, it was amazing. And I say that my husband's an astronomer, but like they call them amateurs, not in any derogatory way, but the amateur astronomers are amazing. Biochemistry does a lot of gamified projects, microbiology. I mean, it's fascinating what they have learned. Conservation biology, again, a little bit close to home. Um, Marine biology and geography were really fun chapters because they were focused in North Carolina. And so, because in some of the chapters, I was doing Zoom interviews or phone interviews, but for some of them, I also got to meet people face to face. So that kind of varied. And then public health. So I'm just going to highlight, I don't want to go too long. And then I did get to do a TEDx about my book. That was really fun. Um, anyway, so just to highlight a couple of people, like I mentioned, the amateur astronomers. So like Ginny McCormick, oh my gosh, like so she has her own observatory. That's her personal telescope in New Zealand. And New Zealand, because it's so cloudy there, they don't actually invest in their professional astronomy much. So the amateurs are it. So when there's global networks that need observations, they turn to the amateurs. So at the time when I wrote the book, she had more publications than me. And she even had them in science. Um, anyway, she was really amazing, which is why I like that little picture of her. If you can't read it, it says, it ain't easy being a bitch. Anyway, she's just very tough. Um, and so, yeah, she would work 9 to 5. She had a day job 9 to 5 at an art gallery. And then she'd work 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. at her telescope any night it was clear. Uh, anyway, I was also fascinated by the hobby called overclocking. And I don't know if people have heard of that, but overclocking is like people that really juice up their computers and are part of distributed computing networks. And so I met with kids that do that, and they do it, they can't afford fancy computers, so they do it as part of a network. And the ones that I spoke to were part of the bronies. And you can read about that in the biochemistry chapter. Bronies they're young men who love My Little Pony in a non-ironic way. And anyway, and they volunteer together. And so that's what Brony at Home is. Um, and they help with like really advances in a lot of biochemical medical research. Um, and then at the same time, oh, well, these are separate. There was the one with the hands it was really fun to meet the European Earth Watch because they were running programs with bankers that were teaching bankers about climate change. And these were bankers. They all took pictures of themselves with their hands dirty because they were like, our hands are dirty. Like that was like the big deal. And that program like had those guys do 180s, like in terms of um, really understanding climate change and then going back to their jobs. These were like leaders, not just like tellers, but like people who could make changes, like and really putting changes into practice. Um, Anyway, and I didn't speak with this guy who's an inmate at a prison, but with the fellow who developed the program that he was in um, to rear monarchs in the West. And it's a very time-consuming process. And so prisoners have a lot of time. Anyway, and so it was a monarch program to study migration of monarchs in the West, which is also in the entomology chapter. Anyway, I'll just mention a couple more, which was the ones close to home, which was here in North Carolina. It was folks that took so much leadership in monitoring sea turtles, even to the point of moving nests if they were like in risk of flooding. But how it also sparked them because they're so civic minded. Like they would patrol the beaches every morning. And of course, they'd see trash. They didn't just leave it, they coordinated to pick it up. And they didn't just pick it up, they measured it, right? And they would report to the city council and they advocated and they hosted events and they had artists work with it because they realized how much plastic pollution there was. They petitioned local businesses to stop using single-use plastics. So anyway, it was amazing to meet with people who were doing this kind of grassroots work, who started out like helping our state agency, and then were so empowered that they started doing their own projects. And that was same true sort of this was in writing the book was also where I was introduced to the environmental justice movement through meeting with well, this professor, Steve Wing, he was at UNC at the time. He's passed away since. And he introduced me to Naima Muhammad, who's an environmental justice leader here, and Gary Grant. And they had all worked together to get a moratorium on these spray fields that would spray urine and feces from these hog farms. The hog farms produce waste like a small city, but without any real sewage treatment. Anyway, so it's still there's still so many battles there with our factory farms. But anyway, but it was really eye-opening for me to see how the science was used to help communities advocate for their own health. Um, I think that's in the picket fences one. I can't remember what the chapter was. Anyway, and it was really great after the book came out because people would always send me pictures of like them with the book or different displays of where it was. Look at here it is next to Jodi Picoult. I was like, there's my book, there's Jodi Picoult. Anyway, it was just fun. Here's one in Spanish. Like just it was fun uh to promote citizen science in that way. And um And so I was for those years very much rah rah, citizen science is great. It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome. I became a social scientist. And then I started to put a more critical lens on it, just to critique it, to improve it. And that's what sort of my career at NC State has been, bringing it to campus and really trying to make it better. Um, so those are just sort of yeah, that's the background on it. And we can switch to Q&A.
Oh my gosh, Caren, thank you so much. And yes, you have so many great stories. And we birders tend to think the world revolves around, birders and what we do related to birds. And so, of course, we would think that the Great Backyard Bird Count, the Christmas bird count was the end all to be all for science, citizen science. So we have a couple questions, so I want to make sure we get to the questions, and then I just want to make sure that you see that people have put in, I like Kelly says, I really enjoyed learning about all the different interests and projects in your book, to the point of citizen science is so varied and so wide. And so I love when you were talking about choosing the title of your book, Hobbies of Discovery. And yes, for those of you who have published books or been involved in that process, it can be very frustrating because you go in thinking, oh, well, this is what it's going to look like, and this is how it's going to be, and these are the pictures I'm going to use. And your publisher says, no. And so kudos to you, Caren, for being able to make it through that process. I know I had issues with my publisher, and I was like, I'm never writing a book again. Of course, I've since changed my mind. But the let me go to a couple questions that are in the chat. Hang on, give me a second. So Monique is asking, she's got 3 questions. So she's asking, is there a bird returns program on the East Coast? There's a Lundberg rice in California as an example.
Oh, right.
And then let me give you the 2 other questions and you can answer them in any order how you want. But any science, citizen science projects post California fires? And then is banding bird projects or are banding birds, is that only for professional scientists? So let's talk about those a little bit.
Okay. So bird returns, uh, I don't know if it's you're asking if it's in the East Coast. I mean, it's really so that's a project with that eBird runs, I think with the Nature Conservancy and a few others, um, in the Central Valley of California to flood fields. And I think it's a lot of times it is rice fields, but it could be other fields to flood them, um, when real-time data is saying like here's where like that birds are coming down like from Canada and Alaska and whatnot. So on migration or but I don't know the answer if where the other locations are for it. But you
So, and
can
Caren, I do know that there are other locations, and I know there are, and certainly Monique, I would be happy to look into that a little bit more. But yes, those projects are going around to the point, or around the country to the point that Caren mentioned, related to migration of birds, and so lots of great opportunities for communities and people to get involved in that. So, any citizen science projects post California fires?
yes. So in that again, I mean I'm certain there are, but I would say like I'll just put it in the chat. Like the main clearinghouse for projects is scistarter.org. And there's like 2 or 3 thousand projects that are searchable by keywords on SciStarter. Um, but so yeah, I just don't know. I mean, there's thousands of projects, and so yes, I can't keep, I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised. There's so many different air quality monitoring projects in particular. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and so Caren, again, and Monique and folks, there are often opportunities that aren't widely publicized about those kinds of citizen science, at those local levels. And so a lot of times universities and bird ornithological societies and Audubon chapters and so forth will participate in citizen science for very specific things. Like in Florida, um, thinking about the woodpeckers that are in the Ocala National Forest, there's citizen science programs going on with that research and related to fire, but they're not widely publicized. So sometimes you kind of have to hunt for them.
Yeah.
And then the other question that Monique was asking is banding bird projects, is that only for professional scientists?
Um, I mean, so people do have to have the leaders of a banding project need to have the proper permitting. Um, but at like migration banding stations and at oh, I forget what they're called now. There's some other Um, the acronym's escaping me, but so I mean, usually you can there can be volunteer opportunities sometimes at different banding stations, like migratory stations.
Like MAPS, the
The
monitoring
map, that's
avian
what I'm thinking.
productivity.
Yeah. Sometimes they're map stations. Map stations can be almost anywhere. But
Mhm.
then like some like Braddock Bay or like certain particular banding stations, sometimes they'll take volunteers. But yeah, but basically there it has to be under the supervision of someone who is a master bander, who has a master banding permit. Um, so yeah, yeah. And some bird observatories offer opportunities to volunteer and for trainings.
Yeah, and there are, Karen, there are opportunities, and you have gone through so many opportunities for getting engaged in things in your book. I want to go back to something that Roger said, just to add to what you were talking about having a banding permit. He's saying that you need to be doing research with a banding permit. So, USGS, the government entity, that helps monitor the banding permits, they're pretty persnickety. They don't want you just out there banding birds just for the sake of banding birds. So there's rules and regulations, as Karen said, but there are also many opportunities where people will advertise. That's a horrible word to use, but they'll share the fact that they are doing some banding activities someplace. And then that's an opportunity for you to go and watch and see how it is. And then hummingbirds have a whole totally different, you have to have different training and a different permit to do the hummingbird banding. And so you've got, again, fun things being talked about with some of the things that you talked about in your book and the experiences that you have. And again, for those of you that know me and how I read my books, I I want to ask you a couple questions about things that I noticed. You had mentioned in your presentation, in your slides, your work with prisoners. And so tell us a little bit more about that. Like, did you just one day say, oh, I'm going to do that? Or how did that come about?
I mean, um, in terms of the fellow that I interviewed who developed the prison program was out in Oregon. Um, and actually now I don't even remember now how I got connected with him. Um, and I mean, I can tell you a little bit about it. Um, like I said, it was this issue of of um, you know, I think probably people are familiar like that back in the 40s and 50s. Like people were really back then wondering where do all the monarchs go? It was like a big mystery for the field of entomology. But east of the Rockies, there were so many teachers in particular that would take their students out and capture monarchs and put little stickers on them. So it was actually advances in the postal stamp that that's how stickers were first developed. Anyway, and then that made it possible to put little stickers on these butterflies. Anyway, and so the east of the Rockies, it was then later, I think it was in the 70s, that finally one of those monarchs was found in Mexico, right? And that was big National Geographic cover story discovery enabled by decades of citizen science, like people banding these. Anyway, but so it's very clear what happens like for the monarch path east of the Rockies. But west of the Rockies, it's a smaller population, and it's really unclear whether it's all to like California, like from the north to California or others. Anyway, so it's just continued puzzle of like what happens. And it was important to know for their conservation. But so in the West, what people would do is gather them in the field, rear them, tag them, and release them, just so there would be more tagged because like I said, they occur at lower densities. But like I said, it's very labor intensive. And so this fellow, he worked, I think, with extension out in Oregon. And um, I think at the time, um, oh, I'm forgetting her name. Um, there's a woman who studies I'm forgetting her name. There was a scientist out west who was started doing programs with prisoners, doing different science programs. Anyway, he set up this particular prison program in Walla Walla State Penitentiary, and and he did it with the prisoners that were in closed captivity, like they were separated from all the other prisoners to keep them safe because their crimes were so horrendous that they people might want to hurt them. And that's the population he worked with actually. And they just had to have not had any history of harming animals. And he said it was just amazing the care that they gave because like I said, they would have to harvest fresh milkweed like almost every day, and they would have to find every little instar and like move it from a dead milkweed to a live milkweed. And it was like slow and meticulous, and you had to be super gentle. And they did better than any of the scientists at rearing those monarchs. Like, and and it was all very poetic, like for them to watch those monarchs, because they would also release them, and those monarchs would go on to freedom, but which those guys were not going to see.
Thank you for kind of talking a little bit more about that. It's amazing how projects like this can reach people and engage people that you might not have otherwise thought would be engaged. So there's just so much to talk about in your book. And for those of you that haven't read it, highly recommend it. You mentioned some things about tragic events. And so for those of you that do have the book, or when you get the book, on page 47, you talk a little bit about tragic events and how they sometimes bring awareness, and it gives us the opportunity to learn. So some of the things that you bring up throughout the book is even talking about the mapping, like the grassroots mapping, and how people get engaged in that sort of thing. And so, when you think about the work that you do with citizen science and the people aspect of it, does that give you like hope that people are going to be more aware of the environment and have an opportunity to think about it at a different level?
I mean, yeah, like I think, um, yeah, there's a lot of inspiring stories about um, people organizing like through a citizen science project, like because of a dire need, because of a certain event. I don't know which one are you referring to, like the Gulf oil spill or yeah. Um, and uh, I think, I mean, sometimes for some people, I guess it is like when it's something acute and like a very visible problem, it's can be easier for us to gather around. But in many ways, citizen science and like the long-term nature of the monitoring and the way many of the programs are structured, it also helps us keep pushing towards fixing our really chronic problems too. Um, I think I think it's really amazing too that for so projects like you were saying, like they just really differ in so many different ways. Even within a field, they'll be really different. Some will be small and community based and people working together and all know each other and interact every day. And others will be people who never meet, right? But who have a shared interest. Um, and they know, but they still will feel connected and still know they're contributing to part of something larger. Um, and can have that connection. So, uh, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I even draw an analogy to democracy, right? And there's so many ways we can participate in our democracy. And like the simplest way actually is just to go vote, although not, you know what I mean? And that's like the simplest way is just to share the observation of the bird you saw. But then there's like actually so many layers to it. And you can go to meetings and you can talk to other people and you can help educate others and advocate for certain things. You can be in a leadership role. Like and it's the same in the participatory sciences. Like someone in here said they were one of the ambassadors, like a sci starter ambassador. There's like a lot of different roles that people can play um, uh, in these projects. Yeah. And some
Yeah,
projects, yeah. Go ahead.
you have in your book I don't know that it's actually a quote. I wrote down quote, but in when you're talking about getting involved in citizen science and technology policies and things, you talk about John F. Kennedy, and John F. Kennedy has that don't. Oh, I'm just going to totally mess up the quote. Like, don't ask what the government can do for you, but what you can do for the government. And you kind of have that analogy in here, and I love that. And so, for those of you that are looking at your book, it's on page 151. But participants don't ask what science can do for them, but what they can do for science. And so I think about that a lot as I'm thinking about, a conservation project that I'm working on, and, what citizen science is there to help me, with that. And so I love that. It's like, what can you do for science? And to your point of social justice or the environmental inequities. So you talk about that in it's on page 221, and I forget which chapter it's in. But can you just explain a little bit about that social injustice, and how does citizen science and people fit into that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so in the US, I mean, our our neighborhoods and our land use, um, like, I mean, it is very segregated by income, like by wealth and by race. And um, and so the patterns that people have seen is that a lot of environmental pollution will be concentrated in areas that are lower income and that are often of different ethnic minorities. And those are just patterns that have been documented. And so anyway, so that's what's considered like an environmental injustice is that, oh, the burdens of these pollutions are not um and it's not only the burdens, it also can be the infrastructure, like where there's stormwater infrastructure or, whatever. Just all those things often relate to economics and to race. And so how participatory sciences it looks really different in these different communities. So in a fence line community, that is surrounded by industry, like a neighborhood surrounded by polluting industries, what citizen science looks like there is often really different than what it might look like, um, in a neighborhood that's surrounded by a park or that's adjacent to like a beautiful, pristine park. So, anyway, so that is explored, and it looks different in the sense of like how it's organized, because a lot of times the academic projects are like just focused on the pristine park. And so some people call it undone science. It's like these gaps, like, oh, no one's studying this particular problem a community is experiencing. And so it'll be grassroots. It'll be a community science project where people access scientific tools, air monitoring equipment, whatever it might be, to help get the data that's needed, because that's how our systems are set up. It's like we want science-informed policies and science-informed um, compliance, with laws, and so data are often needed. Anyway, so I'm just saying it often looks different depending upon which communities are involved.
Thanks for that, Caren. And it sounds like, it looks like we have a group of people joining us this evening for this Bird Book Club that are really interested in citizen science and looking for places to participate. I'm going to ask a very unfair and last question of you before we start to head out for the night. If you were to pick one citizen science project that a majority of people could participate in, what would it be? What would you recommend? What do you think? What would you go, oh, you should do?
Well, Hmm. Well, I mean,
I told you
I
it
would
wasn't
assume
fair.
well, I mean, does everyone already do iNaturalist and eBird? Like, I would
Yeah,
assume
so I'd
those are
love to
like the
see
two
if like
big
there are
ones.
reactions down at the bottom. There's that little heart and it says reactions. How many of you do Great Backyard Bird Count, Project Feeder Watch, Nest Watch, those? I see lots of hearts exploding. Yeah, lots of people raising their hands. So
How
yeah,
about
good number of people.
iNaturalist? Do people do
I'm
iNaturalist?
naturalists.
Just to take
Yeah,
it a little
so
beyond birds. But uh yeah, and I would say in the uh if it's if you're not feeling like going outside, you can go on the Zooniverse platform. Are people familiar with that? With Zooniverse? I'll just put it in the chat. Um, and you can watch wildlife there. Like it's an online platform for anything where there's too much data that it needs people to help classify things. So you can do snapshot Serengeti and you can look at all these remote camera photographs of animals on the Serengeti and tag them. Or, it's all kinds of disciplines. You can do astronomy, you can do whatever. That's for indoors. Um, oh yeah, Kokoros is great for precipitation monitoring. I mean, honestly, like I mean, obviously, I think people probably know all the bird projects, but like any other interests, it just amazes me. Like, there's always a project for it. It's like, oh, I learned about nurdles and the problem with nurdles. These are like little plastic beads. Oh, there's like 5 nurdle projects like that I could join and take part in. Like pretty much like any topic. If you go on SciStarter and you search it, it'll be like, oh, yeah, there is a project for that. Um, yeah.
well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Oh my gosh, I am super excited to be able to have this conversation with you, and super excited to have all of you join us this evening. And so the message
Can I
I
do my one request? Can I do my request?
absolutely,
Okay, before you close out. So
yep,
this is to everybody
absolutely,
here because you love birds. And if anyone, so I have a book that I'm working on that is a cozy mystery about birders. And so, yeah, and so there's that you can read the first 2 chapters there. I'm looking for readers like, so if that is something that interests you, a reader is someone who could read it and be like, oh, here's where it got boring. This part kept me interesting. Oh, take that other part out. You're going to lose readers. Like someone who just wants to be a critic, because that's what I need. But it's aimed toward the bird nerd. So I'm hoping maybe there might be a person here who might want to do that. So thanks for considering.
yes. So you all can. How did we discussed this, Caren? And I can't remember the solution we came up with. If you're interested in reading the book, do you want them to email
You
us, put it in the chat? How do you? I guess they could
think
message me.
they could message if they're able to message you. Yeah, I
Yep.
think that's what you thought might be best. They would message you and then you would put them in touch with me.
Yeah. So you can go into the chat and find me under instead of everyone, so you don't give everybody your email. You can click and find my name and or Lauren's, and then give us your email, and then we will make sure Caren gets a hold of you so that you can read her book. I love mystery books. It's what I probably spend most of my time reading. And so I'm signing up. It sounds great. And I really did enjoy this book, Caren, and we are going over time a little bit, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will see you again next month for the Valentine's Day Bird Book Club. But until then, if you didn't get a copy, find out of print, but available at on Amazon. Is that right, Caren?
Yeah,
Or in a library?
the ebook is available and then yeah, also on Amazon or library. Exactly. Yep.
Yep. Yep. So highly recommend it. And we are super excited to have a year of citizen science with our celebration for World Migratory Bird Day. And we hope you all will participate in many, many ways. If you haven't signed up to get messages from us, please do so. You would have seen a message come up when you registered for this. And we hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you for joining us. And thank you so much, Caren. Keep up the great work. You are amazing. And we love hearing your stories. And keep in touch with us.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Caren. That was
Yeah,
wonderful.
thanks.
I love that we have a list, and I will gather everything so that when we put this up on YouTube, the links to some of those community science programs or even SciStarter to
Yeah.
locate a project will be present. So
Okay.
just in case anybody didn't write it down,
You
uh,
know, okay. I
if
was just going to
anybody joins
say,
later.
there was one thing, I mean, whatever. One last little story I'm going to tell just about book publishing is that when I sent my proposal out to different agents, I got a call from this one woman. It was Charlotte Sheedy. That's who ended up being my agent. And it was like, darling, total New York, like, darling, oh, I would love the book, Oh, can you write it as YA? I didn't even know at the time what YA meant. I was like, sure, I could. Anyway, it's Ali Sheedy's mother. Do you know the Brat Pack? Ali Sheedy and the Brat Pack? You remember, like the Breakfast Club? Ali Sheedy she's the one with the dandruff. Anyway, her mother I mean, I don't know if she still is a literary agent. And so she was the agent. Well, her agency was the one who was first excited about the book and who got our the book deal for me. So anyway, it was a little anecdote I meant to tell, but I forgot.
Oh, great. Well, I'm looking forward to reading your book, and I've got a number of people who have sent me their emails, so I will collect and gather those to make sure that you get them. And I'm
Oh,
super
awesome.
excited about it. And do you remember, so you've worked at so many of the places that I've worked at and with people like Fitz, at Cornell Lab
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Ornithology. And
Yeah.
do you remember Andre who did the work? He did a lot of swallow work, like swallows, and he would
Well,
do,
mhm.
do the citizen science related to collect how they collect feathers for their nest.
Like
Do
Andre
that
Daunt.
ring?
Do you mean Andre
Yeah,
Daunt? Yeah.
yeah.
So Andre Daunt was my supervisor. And then I also worked a bit with David Winkler. Um,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then yes, of course, Fitz. Yeah.
Now, wait a
Um,
minute. Were you there when we went with Birdwatch to tape the Birdwatch shows? Were you at Cornell during that time? The PBS Birdwatch?
see, I feel
Because
like I
I
would
hosted the
knew.
show
Wait, because
at
yes, I mean,
Cornell.
I remember you, but so I feel like I was in a scene of like looking at the old Nest record cards.
Maybe, maybe.
That's, but it was a
Yeah,
really long time ago, right? But yeah, I remember.
no, that was years ago.
I mean, we had Nest and now they're all digitized. They were all
Yeah,
digitized on the Zooniverse platform.
yeah.
People went on there and finally entered. There were thousands of these old record cards from the back to the 30s even.
So for
Um,
those of you that are still hanging on, um, the at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, we took the PBS Birdwatch so I hosted that with Dick Hutto and Craig Tufts. And so, but they didn't come to the lab, it was me. And so I came to the lab, and Andre took me out into a field, and he said, here, stand out here and hold this feather. And
oh,
so I'm standing out in the middle of a field, like all by myself, and the camera crew's over there, and Andre and other people are kind of in the sidelines, and I'm like, what am I do? Why am I doing this? So the idea is that tree swallows use feathers in their nest, and there's more success the more feathers they have. And so how willing are tree swallows to go to a human to get a feather, because normally you would think that they wouldn't go to humans. So the discovery through some of the citizen science work was that if the swallows were close to water, they had readily available to them feathers that they would use for their nest spot. But if they were farther away from water and they didn't have that option of readily available feathers, they would take more risk. And so here I am standing out in the, field, looking ridiculous. And these swallows come in, and I had to really prevent because I'm on camera, I had to prevent myself from going, oh, because here they came in. So I can imagine, Caren, that you have tons of stories about the citizen science stuff that you have done. And many of
Oh,
them are
right.
in this book.
So in that book.
Yeah. All right. So thank you so
All right.
much
Thanks.
and have a great night. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And those of you that stayed late, you got to hear a little bit of extra stuff.
Alrighty. Bye.
Great. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.